Hello, this screencast will go over how to create a montage that includes subtemporal channels and a custom average reference. And also we'll touch briefly on doing spike detection on subtemporal channels as well. This is Michael Guest, VP of Research and Clinical Applications for Persyst. Let's go ahead and get started. Right now I'm showing a bipolar longitudinal montage. It's one of the default montages in Persyst. And this is showing a 1010 channel map. If you're not using a 1010 channel map for your electrode status display and would like to because you're recording subtemporal electrodes, just let us know. It's pretty easy to set that up. But we can see here we have these additional subtemporal electrodes showing up there. And to see all the channels in a recording, let's go ahead and select the recorded montage. That shows you the raw recording montage that's being recorded to the amplifier reference. And we can see those subtemporal channels here. We also have some channels making their excursions around on the screen. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, for the purposes of this, I'll go ahead and go to General Preferences, and I'm going to go ahead and select Restrict Pen Deflection, which is a bit of an old moniker. But what that'll do is it'll keep some of these channels that have high amplitude or are otherwise unused from intruding on the other channels. So now we can see everything that's being recorded to the amplifier. Now there's a couple of different ways that I could create montages for my subtemporal electrodes. And one of them is to just modify an existing montage and change the reference. And I'll just show that briefly. We're going to go ahead and remove some of the channels that I don't want to include in that particular montage. So I've just highlighted those. By clicking on it, puts a box around it. I can hold down the control key. Now I've got a box around M1 and M2. I'm going to go ahead and select Delete Selected. And let's say I'm not interested in having these particular channels as well. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight these. So click on the first one, hold down the Shift key, and then click on the last one, and it'll select everything in that series of channels. And then I'll go ahead and select Delete Selected. Now ECG2 to reference looks good. I go ahead and change the properties of that by double clicking on the channel label. But let's get rid of this one here, ECG1. That one's not showing the data that I want. And the reason for that, actually, let's go ahead and double click on it. This one was configured on the acquisition system as a polygraphy channel, so it automatically sets is polygraphy channel there. And by removing that designation, then we can see that straightens that out. So is polygraph channel assumes that it's going to be something like SaO2 or another DC value or a calibrated channel to show values for something like pulse oximetry or pressure or what have you. By turning that off, it says, okay, go ahead and render this as a waveform. Since I have two of these, I can choose which one I want to keep. Let's say I'm going to remove this one and just keep ECG2 to reference. I'm going to double click on that. Tell it not to use master control because I want to set this one to use different gain, different filters, and this can be anything you like, of course. Select OK, and now that's resized that. So let's say I want to save this as a montage. Well, I can go ahead and right click, save montage, and I don't want to call it recorded. I've changed the channels in this, and that's hard-coded anyway. That'll always show you everything that's coming into the amplifier and being written to disk. So let's go ahead and call this ST amp ref. And now I've got this montage. Now let's say I want to create an average reference for this using all of the electrodes. Well, what I could do is use one of the built-in hard-coded references. So again, I've just selected a channel here, Shift, so I've selected all the EEG channels. You can also right click and select a subset, and it'll do that as well. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to change reference, and I can pick any of the inputs on this to set as a reference, or one of the hard-coded average references, let's say average 12. That happens to be the reference that's used for spike detection. Now I wouldn't want to use this montage for spike detection because I've got ECG in that. And so let's go ahead and save this though. I'm going to right click, save montage, and I'm going to call this average 12. Okay, so now I've saved this with an average 12 reference. Now if I want to use this for spike detection, I want to get rid of this ECG channel. So I'm going to delete the ECG, and now I've got all my EEG channels here with the average 12. I'm going to right click, save montage, and I'm going to give this a name, and we'll use this later when we change the spike detection montage. I'm going to put spike only, spike detection only. So that one I'm going to reserve for that in a bit. Now let's say we want to create a montage by, well, creating it from scratch. I can right click on this, and I'm going to go ahead and do create montage. By the way, one other thing, if I just want to modify the order of these channels instead of creating a new one, I can just drag and drop channels around the screen. So let's say I wanted to have F10 a little bit higher up in the list. Here, I could do that. So I didn't save that change though, but you can drag and drop channels by clicking and dragging them around vertically. I can go back and select this SD average 12, and it goes back to that. Let's go ahead and create a new montage. Right click, create montage. And I've got some options here. I can show 1020, 1010, or all. And when you see when I select all, it changes this to a grid layout, and I see all my poly channels here. Let's go ahead and select the 1010 system. And I can either do a bipolar. It'll automatically assume that I want to do channels in that configuration. So here we've got some bipolar channels, but I want to create a referential montage. I'm going to go ahead and delete these inputs and deselect the bipolar. And for this, I'm just going to start selecting channels, and you can see it sets them all as reference. And you can, of course, do this in any particular order that you like. So I'm just going to do this in one potential way of doing it. Of course, everybody has their own. So I've selected all these. I've created all of these channels in the order that I wanted them. I can select some, move them up, move them down. Set reference we're not going to use at this point. And the reason is some earlier versions of software wouldn't allow you to set the reference from here. Later ones do allow it. So we're just going to skip that. And personally, I like to do this in the montage itself. So I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this STAVG all. I'm going to average all my scalp channels for that. So for that, I want to go to the average montage editor. But I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I've got this sitting up here, SD average all. Now I can just right click, and I'm going to go ahead and select the subset of 1020 channels, which includes 1010. It selects all the scalp inputs, or I could use the shift key. Now what I want to do is right click and edit average reference. So let's go ahead and deselect prompt for weight. That way it won't ask me each and every time. And I go ahead and select all the channels, but I want to deselect the ones I'm not going to use for the reference. So let's go ahead and turn all of those off. Okay, looks like, oh, M1, and I think we're good. Get rid of the ECG inputs. I don't want those in my average. So I've got all my scalp inputs here, and I'm going to call this average all, but you can call it anything you want. Now the other thing I want to do is normalize and equalize these. And you can see the switches from showing the labels to showing the weights. And I'm going to save that, and I'm going to select done. Now this reference then becomes available, so I can right click, change reference, and I'm going to go to all, and there's my average for all. Now I can right click and save this montage. I'm not going to change the name, and there it is. Now I did mention we're going to change the detection montage. Let's go ahead and split the screen here. There's the trends. I wanted to make sure that it didn't have any trends already calculated. Let's go ahead and go to Preferences and Modify Template. And I'm going to modify my P14 trend template. So now I'm in Modify Template mode in the upper left corner. And I'm going to give this a new name. So I'm going to go to Trend Preferences. And I'm going to go to Save As. And we're going to call this Trend Settings P14 ST. Okay, I'm going to save that. So now it says in the top here, Trend Settings P14 SD for subtemporal. So select OK, and that's the trend template I'm working with. Now I want to change the calculation engine for this. Hold down the Control key, go to Preferences, Trend Preferences, and now I can see calculation engines here. Go to Spike Density, Edit, and instead of the default montage, I can pick the spike detection only montage here, average 12, because the detector is trained using an average 12 reference. We want to continue to use that. And detect generalized spikes tells it to use 3 additional montages, average references, which I'll show you in the montage display. If that's selected, it'll make an attempt to distinguish between focal and generalized discharges. I'm just going to select OK and save. OK, and that's done. That's the only change I made. Close this. Just going to make sure I want to save those changes. Sure. Now I'll go to Preferences, Trend Preferences, and I'm going to open that one I just created because it still says Trend Settings version P14 up at the top. Let's go ahead and pick the one we just created and select OK. So now I can begin to process this recording. So in a nutshell, we've gone through how to create montages, how to create custom average reference montages, and how to set up our spike detector to use subtemporal electrodes as well. Any questions? I'll be happy to join by web conference to go over any of these items. My name is Michael Guest, VP of Research and Clinical Applications. Thanks for watching.